So one thing that monopolies can do is they can engage in strategies called price discrimination. So we're going to have a look at those in this video, and you need to be able to understand the conditions necessary for a firm to be able to engage in price discrimination and look at the advantages and disadvantages of these policies and give some real life examples. So price discrimination is where an identical good or service is sold to different consumers at different prices for reasons not associated with cost. So these products usually have identical costs to each other. The costs aren't changing, but you're just selling them to different groups or different people for different prices. So to be able to do this, the necessary conditions are the vendor can control what's offered, and there are no other firms present in the market that can sell this product at a lower price. So this is why we're studying it just after looking at monopolies. So there's kind of barriers to entry. Other firms can't enter. They can't kind of underprice what the incumbent firm is selling it at, because then the price discrimination would break down. You wouldn't be able to do it. You also got to prevent resale from one buyer to another buyer, because if one buyer is offered a lower price, they could sell it or resell it to one of the buyers that's offered the higher price, and then that would get the kind of price discrimination strategy breaking down again. So that has to be, that's called arbitrage, but that has to be prevented. And the other condition is the consumers have different elasticities of demand. Okay, so some customers are going to be prepared to pay a lot higher prices than other customers. So let's have a look at it. There's three, there are actually four, I think, but there's three that you that come up in textbooks and that you should have an awareness of. But it's really third degree price discrimination that you need to have most awareness of. So first degree price discrimination is when a firm charges a separate price to each individual customer, and each unit is sold at the maximum price that it could be to that consumer. So there's no consumer surplus. Now, the only example that I can think of this is, say, for example, before we had the NHS, if you had a family doctor in a certain town and they had some awareness of how much people were willing to pay, and they charged everybody according to what they were willing to pay. Now, that would sort of work as an example, but I think it'd be really unlikely that, there's some people that would be willing to pay, just literally everything they had, but I'd find it, hard to recognise or hard to believe that a family doctor would, take advantage of that. They're not really going to charge them more than it actually costs. Secondary price discrimination is when a firm charges different price for different quantities or quality of a product. So this is most common actually in off-peak and peak travel, because they're similar products, but they're slightly different, so slightly different timings. So if you get on a train between 7:30 and 9:30 in the morning, it's going to be really expensive because it's kind of peak travel times, whereas past that time everything tends to get a little bit cheaper. And then third degree is when it's the exact same product but sold at different prices to different markets, different kind of segments of the market. Okay, so these diagrams represent, can't seem to find my pen. Here we go. So this one's first degree price discrimination. You can see no consumer surplus, but marginal cost, as you can see in actually all three diagrams and all three cases that we're looking at, is the same. Here is second degree price discrimination, similar diagram, but you're seeing kind of stepped, and it's different bundles, different quantities, different qualities of the product. But you're seeing again, rather than just setting one price and that being the revenue, you get a much higher amount of revenue if you do this. And then this is third degree price discrimination, and we can see here these different elasticities. So a very inelastic market here, very elastic market here, and we're profit maximizing because it's where marginal revenue intersects the marginal cost curve, and we're able to this amount, and this is the price that we're charging to the elastic market, and we're going to charge a more to the inelastic market. Now, I do go through this a little bit more slowly in one of my videos where I'm drawing out the diagram, so that's why I'm not going through it in a lot of detail at this point. But this is the one that you're looking at for your exams. So the outcomes. Advantages for the monopolist first. So they increase their revenue compared to setting a single price as your trying to get rid of the consumer surplus as much as possible. So you're increasing your profit therefore. Output also is going to be larger because you can sell more output without necessarily having to lower the price. So remember that monopolists are price makers, so they can either set the price or they can set the quantity, but they can't set both. And if they want to increase the amount that they sell, they have to lower the price. But if you can sell to two different groups, slightly different prices, even though they're the same product, you don't have to lower the price necessarily for the group that are willing to pay a much higher price. You can also increase your capacity utilisation. Now, capacity utilisation is how much you're using of your factory or resources. And this has positive effects usually on motivation. Most people like to work for organisations that they think are busy. Most people, you know, if you ask them if they had a busy day at work and they say yes, they usually add after that, oh, but I prefer it because it makes the time go a bit more quickly. And you often get synergies as well. Synergies are when you know, the sum of the parts add up to more than the parts individually. So firms that look busy, it tends to increase their reputation as well, and people think, oh well, they're busy, must be a reason for that, must be good. Effect on the consumer though, so we've got increased revenue for the producer and reducing the consumer surplus, but the effect on the consumer is loss of welfare because they're losing some of that consumer surplus. I suppose it's passing from, it's not exactly a deadweight loss, because actually this loss of consumer surplus is passing their loss, the consumer's loss is the monopolist gain. It can be inequitable. Well, it is inequitable because some consumers are paying more than others for the same service, certainly with third-degree price discrimination. And however, though, there are some consumers that are able to purchase the product who wouldn't have been able to before, so they're gaining from this. And maybe with all that supernormal profit that they're making, the monopolists invest it, and they might get technological benefits and innovation and efficiency and those types of things. So it really, that's a depends upon though, because it kind of depends upon that firm reinvesting that money. They might not. They might just think, oh, I'll go on a nice big holiday. So the other thing that you need to do is come up with some examples. So I just typed in price discrimination into Google actually and got this, and I thought this was a good one because we've got different bundles here. I think this is Florida, so it must be Disneyland. So different bundles, and so that's secondary price discrimination, really. But here we've got exactly the same products for different ages, and we've got different prices. So that represents third-degree price discrimination. Now on here, and this is the Wikipedia listing page for price discrimination. So go and have a look at that because there's so many examples there. Haggling, academic pricing, loads of different ones there. So have a look at them, pick out some examples that particularly appeal to you. The most common one for the exam is cups of, there was one with cups of coffee, I think a few years ago, and timings as well a few years ago. Don't worry that timings is actually an example of second degree, or I consider it to be secondary price discrimination. This is really the diagram that you'd want, like peak and off-peak travel. It's the one that's most commonly used in the exam.